So you're a Fuji shooter looking to get the most out of your camera with video and not have to actually shoot in F-Log, because F-Log is hard to expose, it's not fun to work with, you gotta do a lot of color grading, and you just want to turn out good content at the flip of a hat. My friend, enter Eterna. Now, what exactly is Eterna and how do we use it on Fuji cameras? Well, in case you've been living under a rock for the past 20 or 30 years, or you've not even been alive for 20 or 30 years, Eterna is one of Fuji's most popular film simulations due to the fact that it gives you a filmic, or dare I say it, cinematic look straight out of camera without a lot having to be done to the footage. I personally use Eterna on projects that I want to turn out fairly quickly and still get a good result. I use it a lot for Instagram stories. I use it a lot for even TikTok, and here on YouTube I use Eterna as well if I just don't feel like doing a lot of grading. So what it is, I actually took my XT3 and shot a few samples for you guys just to show you my process with Eterna when it comes to exposing it, how I shoot Eterna, how I grade Eterna. We're gonna hop into the computer, show you guys that. Let's go ahead and dive on into it. So we are in Premiere Pro, and like I said, I'm going to show you exactly how I grade Eterna. Now before I do that, I want you to know the settings that I use, because I do customize my Eterna settings. Starting off with the dynamic range, we're going to go 400 on that, and what that does is that raises your base ISO to 640 just like F-Log, so it should make it more sensitive on the sensor, which should retain more detail in your highlight and your shadows. Now it's not going to do as good of a job as F-Log at retaining those highlights. As you can tell, we've got some blown there. We've also got some others blown in the other clips, if I can find them. There we go. Blown a little bit down there, and then also blown up here in our sky. So it's not gonna do as good of a job as log footage, obviously, but I did try to expose it to the best of my abilities using the ETTR method, which is exposed to the right. So I set my zebras to 100%, dialed everything back from there, which, like I said, obviously it didn't retain all the detail. But anyways, we're gonna grade this clip right here. This was, I think, my favorite one from the sequence that we did. And the way I'm gonna start off here is I'm actually gonna go to my curves, pull up my scopes here, and this is where I'm gonna use the curves to add back in my contrast, and it'll also bring in some saturation as well. So we're just gonna create a simple S curve, mess with the highlights a little bit, bring the shadows down, and just doing that right there brings in some contrast. So let's move down to the color wheels. Gonna continue to pull those shadows down, and I'm watching my scopes here. We don't want anything to go below 0. Use the mid-tones to raise the overall exposure of the image. I want it to kind of stay right there in the middle. This represents our building right here in the middle of the scope. Let's pull our shadows back down. And like I said, this is just a little dance back and forth, really getting the contrast and the exposure that we want. I'm not really gonna touch the highlight wheel. I don't think that we need to right now, but I think that looks good so far. So let's go down here, or actually let's go up, and now let's mess with our white balance. So we can do a custom white balance. It's gonna make it a little yellow. Actually, it looks pretty good right there. This was shot at golden hour, so we do wanna sell that golden hour look. I'm actually gonna dial that up just a tad on the magenta. I think that looks pretty good right there. So this is what we have so far. Started there, and no curve, no base. That's what we started with, and this is where we're at right now. So where the magic happens is really back in the color wheels. We're gonna get kind of creative and go to the shadows, push some teal down in the shadows, push some orange and yellow up into the midtones. Same thing with the highlights, really just to get that teal orange look. Now you don't want to go overboard with it. And with this, we're gonna adjust our white balance just a tad. Okay, so that looks pretty good so far. The last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna address this sky here. It looks okay, and we don't have a lot of detail in the sky anyways, but I'm gonna use my curves. Come down here to my hue versus hue, and I'm gonna push that sky a little closer to teal. Now we have to be careful because the building is also affected by this since it's blue as well. So we're just gonna be very gentle with that. Come down to the hue versus luma, and we're gonna bring that down some, and that should bring a little bit more detail back into the sky. As you can see, it does. Once again, being very careful with that. So that's what we're looking like now. Not a huge thing, a very, very subtle difference there. And that's really about it with Eterna. Like I said, very easy to grade, just adding some vignette here. And we can go ahead too if we want to, and we can add some sharpening back into the image, because if you remember, we have the sharpening dialed back in camera. And I think that looks good. I mean, let's push a little green in there. The sky was looking a little purple. Yeah, I think that's looking good. And, oop, a little too much. And now you can see, I think this is a good image at the end, and it didn't really take a lot of work. So here was our before, after, and if you notice, it's pretty flat, but not as flat as F-Log. It's a whole lot easier to expose. But yeah, that is my process with Eterna. Hope you guys enjoyed that. As always, thank you for being a part of this channel. If you are new and liked what you saw, consider subscribing. I greatly appreciate it. I love growing this community here on YouTube. Y'all have a good one. We'll see you in the next.